The Who the Folk podcast is sponsored by Ethan Roberts Photography. Spring is here, and if you need a photographer for any of your family events, then you need to check out Ethan Roberts and Ethan Roberts Photography. Ethan shot our child's senior photos last year, and they look fantastic, exactly what she and we were hoping for. But he also shoots professional headshots, weddings, parties, and other events. Check out his website at ethanrobertsphotos.com. Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talk with Naomi Breazeale and Nina Afremov of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas. We talk about the vital work that the pair are doing at the agency, how they got their starts in the organization, and we preview a little bit of the JCRC's annual event on June 2nd on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Naomi Breazeale and Nina Afremov, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You two are the two of the newer and certainly two of the younger folks who are working in the offices of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, both doing incredibly big and important work right now in the organization. As like so much of us in the Jewish community, our workload seemingly has increased a lot since October 7th. So Naomi, I wanted to start with you. You are the advocacy associate for JCRC, which is a fairly new position that's been created. Tell us a little bit about what you've been working on and sort of focusing your time on.
Yeah, so I started with a JCRC in February. So
Okay.
I'm one of the newest employees. And the advocacy associate role is new. So I'm the first person who's had it. And it specifically was born out of the increasing need for advocacy for the Jewish community post October 7th. And so the biggest project I've been working on has been getting an anti-Semitism resolution passed through the DFL and GOP precinct caucuses, Senate district conventions, and so forth. So organizing community members, making sure people know the language, talking points, who's going to which events, and connecting people with each other. Then following up, crunching data has kind of been my main role.
There's lots of precinct caucuses. I believe 4,002 of them.
I honestly don't know the number.
Roughly. I mean, that's statewide. So obviously the focus might not be fully statewide, but
I know we had representation in about 70, I think it was 69 unique precinct caucuses.
Okay.
So I don't know the exact proportion off the top of my head.
No, that's totally fair. But it's a big job, and it's obviously something that's really important to focus on. And we'll get a little more into that. Nina, you're one of your main roles at JCRC is that you're the development and annual event coordinator. Tell us a little bit about what this year's event is. It's always a great thing that the JCRC puts on every June.
Yeah, so this year's event will be featuring Haviv Reddy Gur. He's a veteran Israeli journalist and senior analyst of the Times of Israel, and also a frequent guest on the Call Me Back podcast, which has grown in popularity. I would definitely say that Haviv is up and coming. More and more people are hearing about him, and his presence at the annual event is highly anticipated this year.
Yeah, it's obviously a really important time to be able to hear from Israeli journalists who are on the ground and who are covering what's going on. And I've paid close attention to his work, and you follow his Twitter account. He does not sugarcoat things.
No.
He calls it like he sees it, and if that means calling out Israeli officials, he has not been shy in doing that, which is, I think, important for people to know that he's not coming here just to carry water.
Exactly. And what I also love about Haviv Reddy Gur is that he has an American perspective as well as an Israeli perspective. He was born in Israel, lived here during his youth, and moved back to Israel as a teenager. So he's really fluent in both cultures. And for that reason, I think he can really speak to our audience at the annual event. Because as Jews, I feel that we are bicultural people, being in the diaspora, but also having a connection to Israel.
I think that's true, but I also think that we don't necessarily get
We don't get all
all
the
of
nuances.
right. It's the we don't get the nuance. We don't get the all of the perspective that's needed.
He fills in the gaps.
That's
Yes.
which is excellent and really important. So, Naomi, you mentioned your work with the advocacy and the precinct caucuses, and one of the last week we had an article that I wrote that talked a lot about the sort of the wording and the purpose for these caucus resolutions. And it's been it was really interesting in sort of talking to some of the people who were doing the work behind the scenes and talking to folks at both parties of why they think it's important. This is relatively new work for the JCRC to do.
Mhm.
It's not, that kind of grassroots advocacy has not usually been in their remit. How easy have you found, to get the organization to sort of rally behind that and adapt what it normally does?
I mean, I think the reason I was brought in is specifically because the organization wanted to in the first place. So I work directly with Ethan Roberts, who's the director of government affairs, and he's absolutely fantastic and it does a lot of the pushing for this and a lot of the editing. So big shout out to him. But like specifically for language, like what we were looking for was to make it broad enough that it would apply to both the DFL and the GOP, and that it wouldn't be overtly controversial, but we wouldn't be watering, a condemnation of anti-Semitism down to the point where it could just stand for any sort of hatred or bigotry, because anti-Semitism in and of itself is unique. I think the community itself, like the Jewish community in the Twin Cities and Greater Minnesota, have been incredibly active and proud of turning out. And we've had incredible turnout for trainings and our caucuses. And people have been really good about connecting with one another, giving each other resources. So as somebody who's part of the Jewish community in the Twin Cities, I've been like very, very glad and proud to see, not just through my job, but in engagement at my shul, like the number of people who are involved and are trying to make a difference for, our generations, the generation to come, etc. In Minnesota.
And it's a fascinating development from the organization to sort of take on this role, because I think my sense of it is, and I've talked to Ethan offline about this, but it's really filled an important and needed space in the community right now, because I think we're all feeling at times a little helpless and a little unsure of what's next.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of other communities do a lot of advocacy work and are really good about being very grassroots and attending marches and attending protests. And I feel like from what I've seen from the Jewish community, it's always been very focused on like giant companies or like larger representatives and like the legislature. But that one-to-one connection, that talking to people, having the opportunity for the Jewish community to tell our own story instead of being the character in somebody else's story, I think that's something that we've been harnessing much more recently. And I think it's something that's really powerful.
So at the risk of giving our listeners whiplash by bouncing between the two of you who have very different jobs, but there is a place where this sort of converges, Nina. And I think it's sort of in how the work that Naomi is helping Ethan with parlays into interest and excitement and importance of what the annual event is too, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, a lot of our patrons are involved in our advocacy work. And so they're also the first people to want to support our annual event and come see our amazing speaker, but also share a wonderful summer night together. Were you at last year's event, Lonnie?
I don't believe I was. And I think it was because my daughter's high school graduation weekend was there, and there were things involved that weekend that ate up my time. And unfortunately, I will be out of town this year as well.
Oh, I guess you'll have to send Lev then.
I think I will have to. Yes, Lev Gringo's our associate editor. We may have to send, and a friend of yours.
Yeah,
Well, yes, I may have to send him. I mean, and I think this is right up his alley too, as a sort of a deep thinker, super smart, on the ground, who likes talking about, getting into the weeds of what's going on.
definitely, definitely. Well, at last year's event, we had Dara Horn, and already anti-Semitism has been on the rise for years. And Dara Horn was a great speaker for last year. She's the author of the book, People Love Dead Jews, a 2021 publication, talking about how anti-Semitism isn't really acknowledged, and there's this almost fetishization of dead Jews in media and in political discourse. Of course, we named the event Dreams for Living Jews,
Yeah.
right? But that was my first annual event. I started just a year ago,
Okay.
and it's more than just about coming to see a wonderful, nuanced, well-spoken speaker. It's also about getting together with the community, with people involved in advocacy, people who are proud Zionists, and are also involved in their Jewish religious communities, gathering, having a good time, schmoozing, enjoying the wonderful food.
Yes. I mean, I've been several years in the past, and it's a great night for a great cause, but also, talking. I've had the privilege of getting to interview some of the speakers ahead of time for sort of, preview pieces that I've done, and I'm, looking forward to the opportunity to speaking to Haviv for this year as well. And the depth of knowledge that these speakers have on their topic is so phenomenal, and it's so important because the timeliness of what they bring to the community is so needed right now. I mean, and last year as well, and sort of having the right people at the right moment is kind of key when you're building this sort of event.
Mm-hmm. I would say this year is definitely unique though. I mean, the past few years have been rough for world Jewry,
Mm-hmm.
but there has been a ton of change. And even at the beginning stages of planning the annual event, we were asking ourselves, what is the state of the war going to be? What is the state of this conflict going to be in 6 months? Um, and before that, I don't even think we had Naomi on board yet, but
I don't think so. So
a lot.
I was gonna ask then, what is the starting point for when the planning begins for this?
I would say the starting point is right after um, we started planning after our last annual event, June.
So you
Um,
get a couple days off, and then it's into the next thing.
exactly. The first thing you do is book the venue because that
Mm-hmm.
fills up really quick.
Yep.
And then the rest of the planning is kind of spread out. I would say seriously, we started planning again in January.
Okay.
So right before Naomi came on board. But having Naomi definitely makes my job easier and marketing easier. She's creative. She has wonderful ideas. And I would say she was great at helping us plan our beautiful invitation.
Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. So, no, Naomi, you didn't, when you started in February, you didn't really have the luxury of any sort of ramp up time. Like when you started, it was precinct caucus time. It right into that window, and the trainings had probably just started, or probably started before you got on board, right?
Yeah, the first training was before I even started. The second one was my second week, and that my second week at work was also, I believe, the week that Ethan went to Israel. So I was
Oh,
kind
sure.
of thrown to the wolves a little bit. Had the support of coworkers, of course, but as a 22-year-old, I haven't even graduated college yet, so I'm just like I was freaking out, asking people like, what do I even do? But So no, not a much of a ramp up, but I have learned a lot for sure.
Oh, I would imagine so. Where does your I'm curious from both of you really where your backgrounds come from for this particular work, whether it's either in some sort of organizing for you, Naomi, or like general fundraising and event management for you, Nina. Where are your starting points for this?
All right. So when I was a freshman at the University of Minnesota, I worked for the University of Minnesota Foundation Call Center.
Mm.
And so we would cold call alumni and supporters of the university. And, there were times where it was a difficult job talking over the phone with strangers and having to improvise. But I also learned that I really enjoyed advocating for the university. I loved learning about our new programs and calling that supporter pool. I know a bunch of random facts about the University of Minnesota Raptor Center, the law school. I had never stepped foot in the law school, and I was bragging to our supporters, oh yes, the law school does this top 20. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, and I liked connecting with people. Fast forward a little bit later in college, I worked as a bartender for D'Amico Catering.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's kind of where I got my event experience. And I combined these two experiences after I graduated with an internship at the Minnesota Historical Society, where I helped with events, development, endowment reporting, which has perfectly translated into this role at the Jewish Community Relations Council, where I help with our development. I help Steve with stewardship, processing our donations, outreach to our supporters, and events.
That could not pair any better.
Mm-mm.
That works out really well.
Yes, and I have very much enjoyed my position. It combines a lot of skills I have and jobs I've had in the past that I've enjoyed.
That's awesome. And Naomi, how about for you?
I also kind of have like a combination, like two-parter thing going. One was that my sophomore year at Hamlin, was the student leader of Jewish Student Life. And so we don't have a Hillel on Hamlin's campus, and there's a very, very tiny Jewish community there. So I didn't have any like coworkers besides Rabbi Esther Adler from Mount Zion. And so I was putting on all the events at Hamlin, like Pizza in the Hut, for support, etc.
Sure.
And ended up writing new policy for residential life at Hamlin about like use of flame in dorms. So lighting Shabbat candles, Havdalah candles, using incense or smudging if you're indigenous, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that really meaningful, and realized I actually really liked working in a Jewish setting. And then I also interned for Women of the Wall in Jerusalem for this previous summer. I have a scholarship through the Obama Foundation, which allowed me to do that without spending my own money, thankfully. And so I spent a few months doing their social media or helping with their social media at the Rosh Chodesh, protest services at the Kotel, watching, people get sat on and pushed and assaulted and just for praying. And so it's really, meaningful. I got to work in this really small nonprofit environment, which was very, very cool.
Wow.
Yeah, that's Jewish work. And then I have political experience, or I work in government. So I interned in Senator Klobuchar's office for a semester. That was the second semester of my junior year, and then this fall I interned in boards and commissions in the governor's office.
Okay.
So I've had some like behind the scenes work of government, but never on the side of policy, which is something I am passionate about. So I've been able to combine the passion for Judaism and Jewish culture and practice and politics, policy, advocacy. It's not very often that a college student gets like the dream job, right? Even before graduating college. So I found myself very lucky.
That seems very unfair. And like people should know like this isn't the norm.
No.
To be able to pull that off. That's
I'm milking it, don't worry.
No, you should. You should milk it. I mean, and really for both of you, it's like working at a place that sort of combines your passion for Judaism with your areas of interest, you're very lucky to be able to swing that.
Oh, absolutely. I originally didn't apply for this job. It didn't exist when I applied, so I found a listing on actually on the TC Folk website for a job here that had to do with the media, graphics, which
Yep.
is not something I have any expertise in at all. Like I can use Canva, but I when they offered me this job, they asked if it was something I was even interested in. I was just saying that I just wanted to get my foot in the door. Like
Right.
I didn't even really want that specific job. I just wanted to have the opportunity to work for a Jewish organization and like be part of something bigger and more important. So I'm happy to be here for sure.
That's crazy that like it just everything works out for the two of you to both be in these positions that combine so much of what you're interested in. From a background standpoint, both of you are Twin Cities natives, resident, or did school bring you to the Twin Cities?
I'm a Twin Cities native. I grew up in St. Louis Park, born and raised
Okay.
in SFP.
I was born in St. Louis Park, but I
Okay.
grew up in Hudson, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
Actually moved back to Twin Cities for school. I go to Hamlin. But my dad's family is from Texas. My mom's family is from Massachusetts. So no family connections besides being born and raised here.
Okay. Good place to come back to, though.
I like it here.
What was the draw for Hamlin then, as somebody who?
I find it challenging now post October 7th, but I definitely like speak the progressive language and hold progressive values. And like I went to high school during the Trump presidency and really, really wanted to go to a progressive school where I wasn't going to have to explain basic social justice concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was what really drew me to Hamlin. Plus, I could commute, and so it was cheaper. Um, but post October 7th, I've found myself very much so distanced from campus, not particularly welcomed by fellow students, and so I have found myself kind of like counting down the days. Graduation's in a month.
Oh,
But I hope that the school can get back to being a really, really good place for Jewish students to belong. And be part of that progressive discourse.
I was curious, is there a relationship between Minnesota Hillel with Hamlin? I know you mentioned you did there wasn't a Hillel on campus, but I just wasn't sure what because it's so close. It's just down the road.
Yeah. So technically, the Minnesota Hillel isn't just University of Minnesota; it's any university in the state of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So a Hamlin student could go to the Minnesota Hillel, and I did for like a Passover Seder and like one Shabbat dinner. And I did my sophomore year partner with Minnesota Hillel to get kosher for Passover meals delivered to Hamlin for free for
Oh,
students,
nice.
which ended up just being me and one other student taking advantage of that. But hey, I got free food, so it's okay. But it's a bit of a drive, and it's kind of awkward to go from a tiny school and then everybody already knows each other at the U, so there's kind of a separation barrier there. But I know that they've recently been doing a really good job of getting more engagement with other schools, just kind of building community between campuses. So.
I mean, there's so many campuses in such a small radius from where Hillel is that it's good. It's nice to see that sort of accessibility.
Yeah, I know. Like for myself, that most people don't go to Hillel. A lot of us actually go to the Chabad off campus in Mac Groveland, which Nina will be coming to this Friday. So very exciting.
Oh, fun.
So that's kind of where a lot of the off-campus Jewish community ends up.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean that's a newer Chabad.
Yeah, it started I think like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's a fellow. They've been around the fellow family for ages. So
yes, they've been in the St. Paul community for a long time, but having that the Mac Groveland sort of like just a space in between, sort of the maybe uptown and campus and St. Paul Chabads. nice to sort of fill that neighborhood and between McAllister and Hamlin. So as two of the newer, and certainly two of, again, as I said at the top, two of the younger people at JCRC, is it, how do you two get along? Is it nice to have sort of somebody who's like a contemporary age-wise in a pretty established office? And again, I don't mean established as as euphemism for old. Like, I am friends with Steve. I'm friends with all of the staff there. They're great people, but it's got to be a little bit nice to have somebody who's more of a contemporary.
Yes, I mean, when I joined a year ago, it seemed that most people had been there for many years, were mid or late career. And then about a year into being on the team, it was pretty wonderful to have Naomi join, same kind of stage in life, and we clicked.
Yeah, we do lunch together. I'm in the office 3 days a week because I balance classes, and she usually pops over to whatever office I'm floating in lunch today. I'm like, absolutely. So we get our little 30-minute chat session in about whatever. But it's been good. Like, we talk about, like, maybe we do a camping trip together someday soon. We're like,
Just as long as we leave before Friday at sundown.
I'm gonna say I'm religious, Nina.
Hey, listen,
So,
you got to do what you got to do. And also,
exactly.
I'm not sure you're going to be allowed to go anywhere until after the June 2nd benefit. I think you're pretty much locked into being in the Twin Cities, but until then,
maybe a celebratory trip.
Celebratory.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Celebratory camping trip to after the benefit.
Precisely.
Awesome. And we will have links to the benefit and everything JCRC in the show notes, so people can go check out that and buy their tickets from right there. Last couple of questions then, and we will let you get back to your very busy days, because obviously there is no shortage of anything for us in the Jewish community right now. Nina, I'm going to start with you first. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
My favorite Jewish holiday is probably Rosh Hashanah.
Okay.
I love
come?
the apple honey. Friends and I get together and usually go to an apple orchard, and it's during one of my favorite times of year.
Fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And Naomi, how about you?
I like bounce between a few different ones. I don't know, controversially really, really love Yom Kippur. So I find it very spiritually fulfilling, and I love the liturgy of it all. I wish I could eat on that day, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It happens. I also really, really like Simchas Torah. So I spent this previous one at the Lubavitch house, and was completely offline for the entire weekend, just dancing the nights away. So I find it very, very fun as well.
Yom Kippur is not as controversial as you think. I get that answer more often than you might expect.
Really? I did not know that.
In part, I think it's because something of what you said of the spirituality that people find in it, and that is very fulfilling for people. And I think that's why people land on it. I mean, everybody's whys are slightly different, but I think to distill it down, that's about that reason. And favorite Jewish food, Nina?
I would have to say matzo ball soup.
Okay. Anyone's in particular?
Probably my grandma's. She used to make these matzo ball soups with like the biggest matzo balls you've ever seen, like the size of like a grapefruit. We'll never forget that. But I guess the matzo ball soup at Crossroads Deli is also pretty good.
All right. This is the question. I mean, both of you looked, I mean, nobody else can see this because, it's audio. Both of you looked slightly stumped when I asked that question. And that is the usual response. This, like, I can ask what I think are really complicated questions of people. And when I get to these last two, this is the one where they're like, oh no, I got to decide. This is a common reaction of most people. So no worries. All right, Naomi, how about you?
Mine for sure has to be Feroce. I grew up on this like super Sephardi Mizrahi style crowset with like the apricots and the dates and the prunes and the like very, very well seasoned cinnamon nutmeg.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always offer to bring the crowset to the Pesach Seder because I can't get behind like the find it kind of bland sometimes. So, but my mom would make a bunch of crowset and then she would give me my own separate container. And she said, this is your allotment for the week. Because if not, I would just go through the entire family's crowset.
That's totally reasonable. We're not hosting a Seder this year, but I will make my own choroset to have in the house for the week that I can just snack on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, it's the best. I'm fine with just traditional, I guess, Ashkenazi choroset of the walnuts, apples, cinnamon, wine. Like, I'm fine with that. Like, that's totally fine with me. Just got to have enough cinnamon to really season well.
Oh, you gotta try it with the fruits. I'm telling you, it is a game changer. With a little nutmeg in it. Come on.
All right, I'll give it some thought. Think one of these years maybe you'll convert me on that. Naomi Breazeale, Nina Afremov, thank you both so much. It was a joy to talk to you both, and best of luck with incredibly weighty things that you're working on at JCRC right now. I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Thank you.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.